Welcome to Billionaire Diaries Tales, where I share powerful stories about family, life, betrayal, karma, and success. The story you are about to watch will help you see life from a new perspective and help broaden your mind about the importance of training a smart and intelligent child from infancy. Pay close attention as Andrew tells us his story.
I remember the exact moment my stepmother's smile stopped looking like love, and slowly I began to understand something important. Family can betray you, trust can break. People you love can hide dangerous intentions, but those painful moments also teach something powerful. They teach you how to see clearly. They teach you strength. They teach you who you truly are and ways to be strategic. It happened inside my father's study in our house in Surulere, East Lagos. The afternoon sun shone through the wide window and lit up the wooden desk where my father used to sit every evening. My stepmother, Rosaline, was standing beside the shelf. She thought I was not at home, but I was standing quietly outside the door. And what I heard that day made my whole body freeze. Rosaline was on the phone. Her voice was low but clear enough for me to hear every word.
Do not worry, Joshua still trusts me completely. Andrew is just a child and so much trusts me. He will sign anything I give him.
My heart jumped. My name is Andrew, and my uncle Joshua was the lawyer who handled my father's business. Rosaline continued speaking.
In a few days, everything will belong to me.
I stopped breathing. Everything? What did she mean, everything? My father had only been buried 4 days ago. 4 days. And yet she was already talking like she owned the world he built. Then she said something that made my hands start shaking.
Andrew will not be a problem anymore. Just relax.
My chest tightened. Not a problem. What did she mean by that? Besides, I was never problematic. At that exact moment, the floor beneath my foot made a soft sound. Rosaline stopped talking. The room became silent. Then slowly, the study door began to open, and Rosaline stood there staring straight at me. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes looked like she knew everything. And that was the moment I realized something was terribly wrong. But to understand how everything began, let me take you back to the day my father died. My father, Anderson, was one of the most respected property developers in Lagos. People in Ikoyi, Lekki, and Victoria Island knew his name. He was strict in business, but very kind at home. To me, and he was not just a father, he was my best friend. After my mother died when I was very young, my father raised me alone for many years. Then one day, when I was 12, he married Rosaline. I still remember the first day I saw her. She was beautiful, calm, and very polite. She wore a soft blue dress and spoke gently to everyone. At first, I did not like the idea of having a stepmother, but Rosaline made it very easy. She brought me gifts. She helped me with my schoolwork. She even learned how to cook my favorite jollof rice exactly the way my late mother used to make it. Sometimes she would sit beside me in the living room and say softly, "Andrew, you are like my own son." And slowly I began to believe her. Even my father seemed happier. Our house in Surulere became lively again. Dinner conversations returned. There was laughter. There was warmth. But looking back now, I realized something. Rosaline always watched everything. She watched how my father signed his documents. She watched how he handled money. She watched the way his lawyer, Joshua, visited the house every month. At the time, I thought she was just being interested in my father's work. But now I know she was studying everything. Then 2 weeks ago, something terrible happened. My father collapsed in his office. He had been working long hours for weeks, preparing a large project in Victoria Island. That afternoon, his driver rushed him to the hospital. By the time I arrived there, the doctors had already tried everything. My father was gone, just like that. Everything in my world broke. The funeral happened 3 days later. Many important people in Lagos came. Business partners, friends, even government officials. Everyone spoke about how kind and hard-working my father had been. I could barely hear anything. I just sat there staring at the coffin. Rosaline cried loudly the entire time. She held my hand tightly and told everyone, "Andrew is my son. I will take care of him." People praised her. They said she was a strong woman. They said my father was lucky to have married her. For the first few days after the burial, Rosaline became even kinder to me. She would knock gently before entering my room. "Andrew," she would say softly, "have you eaten?" Sometimes she would bring me breakfast herself. She stopped me from worrying about school. She said I should take time to heal. At one evening, she sat beside me in the living room and said, "Your father loved you more than anything in this world." I nodded slowly. My throat hurt too much to speak. Then she added something strange. "But your father also trusted me to protect everything he built." At that moment, I thought she was just being responsible. I had no idea what she really meant. 2 days later, Uncle Joshua came to visit. He was my father's lawyer and closest friend. He had known my father for many years. Joshua was a tall man with calm eyes and a deep voice. When he saw me, he hugged me tightly. "Your father was proud of you, Andrew," he said. Then he went into the study with Rosaline. They spoke for a long time. When Joshua came out, his face looked serious. But when he saw me watching, he forced a small smile. "Everything will be fine," he said. At the time, I believed him. But the next morning, something strange happened. Rosaline called me into the study. The same study where my father used to sit every night. The same study where I later overheard that terrible phone call. Rosaline smiled warmly as she placed several documents on the desk. "Andrew," she said kindly, "these are just small papers your father left behind. Joshua prepared them." I looked at the documents. There were many pages. Too many. "Do I need to read them?" I asked. Rosaline laughed softly. "Oh no, my dear. They are just formal things." She pushed a pen toward me. "Just sign here so we can finalize everything." I stared at the papers. Something inside me felt uncomfortable. Not fear. Just confusion. I remembered something my father used to say. "Never sign what you do not understand." So I looked up at Rosaline and said quietly, "I think I should ask Uncle Joshua first." For the first time since my father died, Rosaline's smile disappeared, just for a second. Then it returned, but it looked different, colder. And that night, I overheard the phone call that changed everything, the call where she said I would not be a problem anymore. And now, standing in the doorway of my father's study, looking at Rosaline's calm face staring straight at me, I suddenly realized something terrifying. Maybe my father's death was not the end of the story. Maybe it was only the beginning. And the worst part? Rosaline slowly stepped closer to me, and then she spoke in a voice that sounded gentle, but made my heart beat harder than ever before. "Andrew," she said quietly, "how long have you been standing there?" My heart began to beat so loudly I was sure Rosaline could hear it. She stood in front of me, her face calm, her eyes searching mine. I forced a small smile. "I just came now," I said. For a moment, Rosaline did not speak. She looked at me carefully, as if trying to read my mind. Then her soft smile returned. "Oh, Andrew," she said gently, placing her hand on my shoulder, "you frightened me." Her voice sounded warm again, almost too warm. "Come inside," she said, stepping away from the door. I slowly walked into the study. The same room where my father used to sit and tell me stories about business, life, and honesty. But that day the room felt different. Colder, and I just wished I had a sibling to share my innermost feelings. Rosaline walked back to the desk and placed her phone down calmly. You should knock whenever you are at the door, not just standing there," she said lightly. "I'm sorry," I replied. She nodded slowly, then she looked at me again. "Did you hear anything I said on the phone?" My chest tightened. This was the moment. If I answered wrongly, something inside me told me things could become very dangerous. I shook my head. "No, I didn't hear anything." Rosaline watched me for a few seconds, then she smiled again. "Good," she said softly. She walked toward the window and folded her arms. "You know, Andrew, life can change very quickly." I did not respond. She continued speaking. "Your father handled many businesses, many properties, many investments." She turned to face me again. "And now someone must take care of everything." I nodded slowly. "Yes." Rosaline's voice became softer. "That person is me." Something about the way she said it made my stomach feel strange, not like a mother talking to a child. and more like someone announcing power. She sat down behind my father's chair. That was the first time I had ever seen anyone sit there. It felt wrong. Then she opened a file and pushed some papers toward me again. "These are the same documents from yesterday," she said. "I told you they are simple." She slid the pen toward me. "All you need to do is sign." I looked at the papers again, but this time something caught my attention. At the top of the page were words I had never seen before. On transfer of controlling ownership. I did not fully understand the meaning, but something inside me told me this was important, very important. "Where is Uncle Joshua?" I asked quietly. Rosaline paused. Her fingers tapped lightly on the desk. "He is busy today. I want him to explain the documents," I said. For a moment the room became silent. Rosaline slowly leaned back in the chair. The smile on her face did not disappear, but it changed again. "Andrew," she said calmly, "do you not trust me?" That question made me feel guilty immediately. Of course I trusted her. She had been kind to me for years. She had comforted me when my father died. But the phone call I heard was still echoing inside my head. Joshua still trusts me completely. Andrew will sign anything. Once the documents are signed, Andrew will not be a problem anymore. My fingers felt cold. "I trust you," I said quietly. "But my father always told me to understand what I sign." Rosaline's eyes became very still. For the first time, the room felt heavy. Then she stood up slowly. She walked around the desk and stopped right in front of me. Her voice dropped lower. "You miss your father very much, don't you?" My throat tightened. "Yes." She nodded sympathetically. "I miss him too, more than words could say." Then she leaned closer. "So you should allow me to handle everything the way he trusted me to." Her words sounded caring, but something about them felt like a warning. I stepped back slightly. "I will sign after Uncle Joshua explains," I repeated. For a few seconds, Rosaline did not move. Then she straightened up and gave a soft laugh. "Of course, Andrew," she said smoothly. "If that makes you comfortable." She picked up the documents and closed the file. "Go and rest. You have had a difficult week." I nodded and left the study. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, my chest felt tight. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That night I could not sleep. My father's words kept returning to my mind. "Never sign what you do not understand." Around 10 p.m., I decided to call Uncle Joshua, but when I dialed his number, the phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again, still nothing. That was strange. Uncle Joshua always answered my calls, especially after my father's death. I tried one more time. Still nothing. A strange fear slowly began to grow inside me. Then something else happened. As I sat quietly on my bed, I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow footsteps. Curious, I walked quietly to the top of the staircase. The lights in the living room were dim. Rosaline, my stepmother, was standing near the front door. She was speaking with someone. A man. I could not see his face clearly, but I recognized his voice. It was deep and calm. The man spoke quietly. "Has the boy signed the papers?" My heart stopped. Rosaline shook her head. "Not yet," she replied. The man sighed. "You told us it would be easy." Rosaline's voice became colder. "It will still be easy." "What if he keeps refusing?" Rosaline crossed her arms. "He is just a child." The man paused. "And Joshua?" Rosaline gave a small smile. "Joshua will not interfere." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. The man nodded slowly. "Good. Because the investors are already waiting." "Investors? What investors?" Then Rosaline said something that made my entire body freeze. "Once Andrew signs, the Surulaire house, the Victoria Island project, and the Lekki properties will all transfer immediately." My heart began pounding. Those were my father's biggest assets. The man asked quietly, "And the boy?" Rosaline's answer came calmly. "After everything is transferred, Andrew can go and live with his aunt in Ibadan." The man chuckled. That will be the end of the problem." Rosaline nodded. "Yes." My hands began shaking. They were planning everything. They were planning to take everything my father owned and send me away. Then suddenly, the floorboard under my foot made a loud creak. The voices downstairs stopped. Silence. Then Rosaline slowly looked up toward the staircase. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Rosaline spoke calmly. "Andrew." Her voice echoed through the quiet house. "Oh, come downstairs." My heart began beating harder than ever, because standing beside her, I could now clearly see the face of the man she was speaking with. And the moment I recognized him, my entire body went cold, because the man standing beside Rosaline was Uncle Joshua. My legs felt weak. I stood frozen at the top of the staircase, staring down at the living room. The man standing beside Rosaline was not a stranger. It was Uncle Joshua, and the same man who hugged me at my father's funeral. The same man who told me everything would be fine. My mind could not understand what I was seeing. Joshua looked up at me slowly. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Rosaline smiled. "Andrew," she said gently, "why are you standing there? Come down." Her voice sounded calm, almost friendly, but the calmness made it worse. My feet slowly moved down the stairs. Each step felt heavy. When I reached the living room, Joshua gave a small smile. "Oh, Andrew," he said warmly, "you should be sleeping." I stared at him. "You didn't answer my calls." Joshua adjusted his glasses. "I was busy," he replied. His voice sounded normal, but something about it felt different. Empty. Rosaline stepped closer to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder again. "You must not worry yourself too much, Andrew," she said softly. "We were only discussing business matters." Business matters. The same business matters that involved taking everything my father owned. And I forced myself to stay calm. "I heard some of it," I said quietly. Rosaline's hand froze for a moment. Joshua looked at me carefully. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked. The room became silent again. I remembered my father's voice in my head. "Stay calm before you understand everything." So I shrugged lightly. "Just something about investors." Rosaline relaxed slightly. Joshua gave a slow nod. "Yes," he said. "Your father had many investors." He walked toward the sofa and sat down like he owned the place. "Andrew," he continued, "you are still young. Business matters can be complicated." Rosaline sat beside him. "We are only trying to protect your father's legacy," she added. Her smile returned again. "But for us to do that, the documents must be signed." Joshua leaned forward. "That is why Rosaline asked you earlier." My heart beat faster. They were still trying to make me sign. I swallowed. "I want to read them first," I said. Joshua chuckled softly. "Of course, but legal documents can be difficult to understand." He stood up and walked toward the study door. "Why don't we finish it tonight?" Rosaline nodded. "That would be better." Something about the way they looked at each other made my stomach twist. Joshua opened the study door. "Come, Andrew." I slowly followed them inside. The study light was bright. My father's chair was still behind the desk, but this time Joshua sat there. And that alone made my chest hurt. I was scared for my life. Rosaline stood beside him. Joshua opened the file and spread the papers across the desk. "These documents are simple," he said calmly. "They only allow Rosaline to manage your father's companies until you are older." Rosaline added gently, "It is only temporary." Temporary. But I remembered the words I saw earlier. Transfer of controlling ownership. Joshua pointed to a page. "Sign here." My hand felt heavy as I picked up the pen, and Joshua and Rosaline watched me closely. The room felt too quiet. Then suddenly something caught my eye again. At the bottom of the page were more words, permanent asset transfer. My heart jumped. That was not temporary, that was permanent. My fingers slowly stopped moving. Joshua noticed immediately. "Is there a problem?" he asked. I looked up. "Yes." Joshua's eyebrows lifted slightly. "What is it?" I pointed to the line. "This says permanent." Rosaline's smile faded slightly. Joshua leaned forward quickly. "Let me see." He glanced at the document for only a second before pushing it aside. "That is just legal wording," he said quickly. "It does not mean what you think." But his voice sounded different now. Tighter. "My father used to say something else. If someone rushes you to sign, something is wrong." I placed the pen down. I remembered I could call my auntie to inform her of the pressure. "I will sign tomorrow," I said. The room went silent. Rosaline's eyes became cold again. Joshua leaned back slowly. "Andrew," he said, his voice now firm, "this is not something that should wait." "I want time," I replied. Rosaline suddenly spoke. "Andrew, do you know how expensive your father's business operations are?" Her voice was sharper now. "There are loans, investors, contracts." Joshua nodded. "If these documents are not signed immediately, everything could collapse." I felt confused. "But my father just died 4 days ago," I said. Rosaline folded her arms. "Exactly." Joshua leaned forward again. "Andrew, you must trust us." My chest felt tight. "I do trust you." Then I looked directly at Joshua. "But I heard what you said downstairs." Joshua's face changed instantly. Rosaline's head turned sharply toward me. "What did you hear?" she asked slowly. My voice trembled slightly. "You asked if I signed the papers." The room froze. Joshua and Rosaline looked at each other. Then Joshua gave a small laugh. "That is normal," he said quickly. Rosaline nodded. "We were only discussing paperwork." But their voices sounded forced now. I stepped back slightly. "I want to speak with my father's other lawyer." The moment those words left my mouth, Joshua's smile disappeared completely. "My father had 2 lawyers," I continued, "Mr. Maywell from Ikoyi." The silence that followed felt heavy. Joshua's jaw tightened. Rosaline's eyes narrowed. Then Joshua spoke slowly. "Andrew, how do you know about Maywell?" My father had told me once during dinner, but I had never mentioned it to anyone else. I took a deep breath. "He is listed in my father's files." Joshua stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "That will not be necessary," he said firmly. Rosaline stepped closer to me. Her voice became dangerously calm. "Andrew, you are making things complicated." My heart began beating faster again. "I just want to understand," I said. Aunt Joshua walked around the desk slowly. He stopped directly in front of me. For the first time since I had known him, his eyes looked cold, very cold. Then he spoke quietly. "Andrew, you really should have signed those papers." My chest tightened. "Why?" I asked. Joshua's lips formed a thin smile. "Because now." He glanced briefly at Rosaline, and then back at me. "Things may become much more difficult for you." My throat went dry, because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Joshua was not just helping Rosaline, he was leading everything. And then he said something that made my heart drop. "Rosaline," he said calmly, "I think it is time Andrew understands the full situation." Rosaline slowly nodded, then she looked at me. And the gentle stepmother I thought I knew completely disappeared. Her voice became cold, very cold. "Andrew," she said slowly, "you are not going to call Mr. Maywell." My heart pounded. "Why not?" Rosaline leaned closer and whispered something that made my entire body freeze. "Because the only person who knows the truth about your father's will," she paused, "is already gone." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Rosaline smiled, not kindly, not warmly, but in a way that made my blood run cold. And then she said something that made my entire world spin. "The night your father collapsed," her voice was quiet, "but he did not collapse alone." My heart felt like it stopped. The words Rosaline just said hung in the air like something heavy. "The night your father collapsed, he did not collapse alone." For a moment I could not speak. I stared at her. Joshua was watching me closely. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. Rosaline folded her arms. "Your father was not feeling well that evening," she said calmly, "but he still insisted on working late." Joshua leaned against the desk. "He was under pressure from investors," he added. And I shook my head. "That is not what I asked." My voice was shaking now. "What do you mean he did not collapse alone?" Rosaline looked at Joshua. Joshua sighed softly, then he spoke like someone explaining a simple story. "I was with him." My chest tightened. "You were?" Joshua nodded. "Yes, I visited him that evening in his office." I felt confused. "But you told everyone you arrived at the hospital later." Joshua shrugged. "That was easier to explain." The room went silent. Well, Rosaline walked slowly toward the window. "You see, Andrew," she said, her voice calm, "your father was a very stubborn man. He refused to listen. My hands began to shake. Listen to what?" Rosaline turned to face me. "To business advice." Joshua continued calmly. "Your father refused to release certain properties to investors who had already paid for them." I frowned. "That does not make sense." Rosaline's eyes narrowed slightly. "Business is not always simple." Joshua crossed his arms. "That night we tried to convince him. I felt a strange chill run through my body." "Tried?" Joshua looked directly into my eyes. "But your father refused." Rosaline spoke again. "He became angry." Joshua nodded. He stood up suddenly. My chest tightened more. "And then?" I asked. Joshua spread his hands, and then he collapsed. Silence filled the room again. I stared at them. Something inside me was screaming that the story was wrong. My father was careful, very careful, and he never got angry in business meetings. Never. Then suddenly something flashed in my mind. The hospital. The doctor. I remembered what the doctor had said that night. He had a sudden heart failure. At the time I believed it. But now the words felt strange. My father had never had heart problems, never. I looked slowly at Rosaline, then at Joshua, and something deep inside me finally understood the truth. These people were not family. They were not protectors. They were not even friends. They were strangers who had been waiting for the right moment. My stepmother, my father's lawyer, two people my father trusted the most, and suddenly something inside me changed. Not fear, something stronger, understanding. I took a slow breath. "You wanted him to sign the properties over to investors," I said quietly. Joshua did not answer. Rosaline watched me. "And when he refused," I continued. My voice felt strangely calm now. "Something happened." Rosaline's eyes hardened. You are imagining things," she said sharply. But I noticed something important. Joshua did not deny it. He only looked away. And in that moment, I realized something about life. Sometimes the people who smile at you the most are the ones planning against you. Sometimes betrayal comes from the people sitting closest to you at dinner. Family does not always mean loyalty. Sometimes family can hurt you more than strangers, and that realization hit me harder than anything else. But something else also happened in that moment. I remembered my father, his voice, his advice, his strength. My father always said something important. True power is not anger, it is patience. I looked back at Rosaline and Joshua, and for the first time that night, I smiled. Joshua frowned. "What is funny?" he asked. I shrugged lightly. "You think I am the problem." Rosaline narrowed her eyes. "You are." I shook my head slowly. "No." I took a step back from the desk. "The problem is that you think I am alone." Joshua stiffened slightly. "What does that mean?" I looked directly at him. My father prepared for many things. Joshua's expression changed. Rosaline frowned. "What are you talking about?" I walked toward the door. "My father told me something 2 months ago." Joshua's jaw tightened. "What did he tell you?" I looked back at them. "He said if anything ever happened to him," I paused, "I should call someone he trusted more than anyone." Joshua's face suddenly lost its confidence. Rosaline's voice became sharp. "Who?" I smiled slightly. "Mr. Maywell." Joshua froze. Rosaline looked confused, but Joshua knew the name, and the way his face changed told me everything. Joshua stepped forward quickly. "You are lying." I shook my head. I already called him. That was not completely true, but it was close enough. Joshua looked toward Rosaline. Rosaline's calm expression began to crack. "What, you called him when?" she asked. "Before coming downstairs," I replied. Joshua rushed toward the window and looked outside. Rosaline turned to him. "Is he here?" Joshua's face looked tense now. "I don't know." But the truth was something else entirely. Earlier that evening, before I heard their conversation, I had sent a message to a number my father once saved on my phone. "Mr. Maywell." I only wrote one sentence. I think something is wrong with my father's documents." I did not even know if the message went through. But now Watching Joshua's face lose confidence, I understood something powerful. Sometimes overcoming betrayal is not about fighting. It is about staying calm long enough for the truth to appear. Rosalind suddenly spoke. "Andrew, stop playing games." Her voice was angry now. "You are just a child." I looked at her quietly. "I am above 18. Then I said something that came straight from my father's words. "I am my father's son." The room became silent again, and for the first time since my father died, I was no longer afraid, because I understood something clearly now. Family can betray you, people you trust can deceive you, but the values someone gives you, honesty, patience, wisdom, those things cannot be stolen, and they were the reason I was standing there strong. Then suddenly, a car stopped outside the house. Joshua's eyes widened. Rosalind turned toward the window, and the moment we heard the gate open, Joshua whispered something under his breath. "Maywell." The sound of the gate opening echoed through the compound. No one in the study spoke. Joshua walked quickly to the window again and pulled the curtain slightly. His face turned pale. "It's him," he whispered. Rosalind rushed to the window beside him. For the first time since I had known her, the calm woman disappeared completely. "What is he doing here?" she asked sharply. Joshua looked angry now. "You said the boy didn't know about him." Rosalind turned toward me slowly. Her eyes were no longer warm, they were cold, very cold. "You called him?" she asked. I did not answer, but I did not need to. The truth was already clear. The sound of a car door closing came from outside, then footsteps. Slow, confident. Rosalind suddenly grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. "Andrew," she said quietly. "You have made a big mistake." Joshua added sharply, "You do not understand how serious this is." I pulled my arm away. "I understand enough." At that moment, the front door downstairs opened. The sound echoed through the house. Footsteps followed. Strong footsteps. A deep voice spoke from the living room. "Andrew?" It was him. Mr. Maywell. Joshua cursed under his breath. Rosalind quickly straightened her dress and tried to calm herself. Joshua wiped his face and forced a smile. Within seconds, both of them were acting normal again, but it was too late. The truth had already shown itself. The study door opened. Mr. Maywell stood there. He was older than Joshua, with silver hair and sharp eyes, the kind of eyes that saw everything. He looked first at me, then at Joshua, then at Rosalind, and in just a few seconds, he understood that something was wrong. "Andrew," he said calmly, "are you all right?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." Joshua quickly stepped forward. "Maywell," he said with a forced laugh, "this is a surprise visit." Mr. Maywell did not smile. "I received a message from Andrew." He looked at the documents on the desk. "About suspicious paperwork." The room became silent. Rosalind spoke quickly. "There is no suspicious paperwork." Joshua nodded. "We were only organizing Anderson's assets." Mr. Maywell walked slowly to the desk. He picked up one of the documents. His eyes moved across the page. Then his expression changed. Very slightly. But I saw it. He looked at another page. Then another. Finally, he placed the papers down and looked straight at Joshua. "You tried to transfer ownership." Joshua said nothing. Rosalind spoke quickly. "That is not what it looks like." Mr. Maywell raised his hand slightly, and the room became quiet again. Then he said something that made Joshua's face completely lose color. "These documents are illegal." Joshua's lips tightened. Rosalind stepped forward. "You are mistaken." Mr. Maywell shook his head slowly. No." Then he turned toward me. "Andrew." "Yes, sir." "Your father came to see me 2 months ago." Rosalind froze. Joshua's eyes widened. Mr. Maywell continued calmly. "He said he was beginning to feel uneasy about certain people around him." Joshua's breathing became heavier. Mr. Maywell's voice remained steady. "So he made changes." Rosalind's voice came out quietly. "What changes?" Mr. Maywell looked directly at her. "Your husband left clear instructions." Joshua whispered, "What instructions?" Mr. Maywell spoke the words slowly. "In the event of his death, all business decisions Must be reviewed by an independent board. Joshua's shoulders dropped slightly. Mr. Maywell continued, and until Andrew becomes a full-grown adult, no property can be transferred. Rosaline stepped back. Joshua's face had turned pale. The trap they planned had already been blocked. Then Mr. Maywell added something else. Your father also recorded a statement. Rosaline's head snapped up. A recording, she said. Mr. Maywell nodded. Yes, Joshua suddenly shouted, this is nonsense. But Mr. Maywell calmly took out his phone. He pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, clear, strong. If anything happens to me, Andrew must be protected. I trust Maywell to ensure no one manipulates my estate. The recording ended. The room fell silent. Joshua looked defeated. Rosaline's face looked empty. And in that moment, everything they planned collapsed. 2 months later, the investigation began. Joshua lost his law license. Rosaline left the Surulaire house quietly. And the strange thing about betrayal is this. It does not always end with revenge. Sometimes it ends with truth, simply standing in the light. Months passed. The house became quiet again. Sometimes I still sat in my father's study, looking at his chair, thinking about everything that happened. And slowly I began to understand something important. Family can betray you, trust can break. People you love can hide dangerous intentions, but those painful moments also teach something powerful. They teach you how to see clearly. They teach you strength. They teach you who you truly are. One evening, as the sun set over Surulaire, I stood in the compound and looked at the house my father built. The house people tried to take, but failed. Mr. Maywell stood beside me. You handled everything very bravely, he said. I shook my head. I was just remembering what my father taught me. Mr. Maywell smiled slightly. Good fathers leave more than money. I looked at the sky and quietly replied, yes. Because in the end, my father did not only leave properties in Lekki, Surulaire and Victoria Island. He left something far more valuable. Wisdom. And that wisdom saved me from the people who pretended to love me the most and feels I'm gullible. I'm super elated you watched this story. Kindly let me know your view about this story. Which city are you watching from? Do well to let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.